So today we're going to talk a little bit about React Native mobile with AWS backend. I have a whole other talk that I talk just on React Native and Expo. This talk is more geared towards the back end of it. So almost on every mobile app that we do, we require some kind of a backend. Most modern app architecture require that backend to not sit on the phone, sit on some kind of a cloud or server component. And this is talking particular about the AWS solution to that. There are other solutions to it. I'll go a little bit over some of the other solutions and their advantages, disadvantages towards the end of this talk. Let's see. There we go. So a little bit about me. I'm a cloud application architect. I work for a giant company called Worldwide Technology out of St. Louis. They are the #1 reseller of networking and Cisco equipment, which is kind of weird because I have zero networking knowledge. But I work in a small consulting arm of that company. We help a lot of large customers convert a lot of regular data centers to cloud environments. There's my email if anybody wants to reach me with any kind of questions or issues afterwards. So I'll talk a little bit about the demo. So as part of our engagements process, we find a lot of times people ask us, hey, I have all these apps, how do I migrate them to the cloud? So over time, we ended up creating a demo called Hero Showdown. Basically what it is, we have a list of heroes, Superman, Batman, any kind of hero. You can add and remove heroes as you want. And then we give them ratings, and then we kind of do a hero one versus another and who wins, and it's kind of a voting system. So that's the general concept of the app. Now, we have it in multiple flavors. So we have it all the way from an old ASP.NET monolith application all the way to our serverless flavor that is fully cloud hosted with basically zero server component to that. What I'm going to talk a little bit is about the mobile flavor I've created the last couple of days to this same concept. And I really simplified it, and I didn't go through all the details that the web app has. Now, a couple of the components that we may or may not see today, user authentication. In Amplify, essentially you use Cognito as the backend, which Cognito is the AWS user management tool or external user management tool. It's a fairly powerful tool. It allows any user to be created. It allows third-party federated authentication. Now, it's not Auth0 or Okta or some of those fancier places, but it's definitely a lot cheaper, easier to manage, and sits already in AWS. So kind of, in my experience, much easier to work with some of those other big players. Data storage, we'll use DynamoDB. It's the NoSQL AWS flavor. Very highly capable database. Only disadvantage I see sometimes in using it is that it's an eventually consistent database. We can go through a whole talk into DynamoDB, but that's going to be our data storage. And then for data retrieval or the whole CRUD operation, we're going to use AppSync and GraphQL. Now, we're not going to use some kind of a graph engine like Apollo. AppSync has its own flavor or version of a GraphQL engine. And so we're going to use that, and Amplify is going to create all that stuff for us. So some of the technologies that I'm going to use in the demo. React Native, like I said, I have a talk just about that, React-based code that compiles down to binaries and executes on mobile devices. It has, very similar, a lot of similarities to React Web. So if you develop in React Web, it's fairly easy to move to React Native. Um, there's a couple of small gotchas here and there in the mobile world that are slightly different, but overall very similar to regular React. Expo. Expo is a startup. It's a funded startup that puts some kind of a framework around the whole build, execute, deploy of React Native mobile apps. What that allows you to do is very easy to test and do things like hot reload. And you can send somebody a link to your app and they'll load it. You don't have to go necessarily through App Store. So Expo has a lot of, and then it has some Expo IO. There's a couple of tools that come with Expo that are really cool if you guys ever want to go and play with Expo. So that's Expo. Now, you can develop React Native without Expo. It's not a requirement. Expo, like I said, makes your life sometimes easier. Sometimes it makes your life harder. And like I said, I have a whole different talk just about those two together or separated. Amplify, that's probably the center of the talk today. It's essentially a framework, a CLI or command line interface framework that allows you to create a lot of scaffolding. So a lot of code is going to automatically, magically be created, which obviously the magic almost always has a price to it. But it allows a lot of that scaffolding between your mobile application, and it doesn't have to be a mobile application. Amplify works with web applications, with almost everything, and it creates a lot of those components in the back end of AWS. The back end of Amplify uses CloudFormation. I don't know if you guys know infrastructure as code. CloudFormation allows you to, it's an AWS native component. You can't port it to Azure or any other cloud provider. That basically builds your entire cloud environment. So Amplify relies heavily on CloudFormation to create all the components that it needs in order to operate. The cool thing about Amplify, like I said, it does a lot of that scaffolding for you and a lot of those internal working of components. And it adds it both to your client-side code and to your server-side code. And so you'll see, I'll show you some of the demo, how easy it is to start creating things right out of the box, and it just works. It has that magic component to that. And then AWS, obviously, one of the largest cloud providers out there, probably over 1,000 of different services at this point, so a very expansive back end. We have customers that do almost everything they can on AWS. Like we can spend whole days just talking about AWS. So those are some of the technologies that are being used. If anybody has questions, feel free to just pop out and ask. Some of the setups, I already done some of the setups, so that way you guys don't sit there and watch the bar spins for this demo. So I'll talk a little bit about some of the pre-requirements and some of the things I've done. If you want to kind of walk through it, you'll have to do those either on your own time or it's fairly quick on some devices, fairly slow on others. Some of the things you have to have is Node.js and NPM, obviously. You have to have an AWS account. AWS accounts are generally free for a year for developers, so it's fairly easy to just go in, sign up. You have to put your credit card, but they don't charge you anything unless you do specific things that cost money. And for the most part, you can stay within the free tier that doesn't cost anything. Amplify, it's a framework you install through NPM. You have to configure it. Part of the configuration basically connects Amplify to AWS. It creates an IAM user. You'll have a token, and Amplify is going to use that user to create the entire backend. Expo, like I said, we talked about another component I have to install through NPM, and then I can use that. I've done already the Expo init, which basically creates the scaffolding of the app. I've used the TypeScript, React Native TypeScript with, I think, with tabs. So I have something to show with the blank app just by itself. And then you go into the folder that Expo just created. You can hit npm start, and then the app will just start loading. The last step that actually we will kind of walk through that is you add Amplify and set it up against the app. And I will show you some of the things that that step does. So we will see some bars moving today, but not a whole lot. Like I said, I try to simplify the demo as much as possible. So let's go to the demo. Let's see if I can minimize that, and we will open the demo. And as you can see, this is a simple React Native Expo application. There's an Expo folder, your assets, components, hooks, navigation, screens. Very similar to what any kind of TypeScript, React Native, or even React application looks like. So very similar folder structure. You can see some of the commands are already run in the terminal to do some of the things for us, to set up Amplify, and then hook up Amplify to the AWS account that was created. And then I've already set up Expo, and then created the app, and I'm inside the app folder. Just for the sake of our sanity, we can do a npm start and really see the app. Oh, I'm sorry. Actually, because this is a Mac, we got to run real quick. We can do it as sudo, but also I have to run some permission piece to allow me to actually save my documentation. But this runs Expo. And let me move this up here. And we'll go back to our code. And you can see once Expo runs, it gives you a really pretty, and actually let me move this as well to here. So you can see there is a, let me minimize that. So there's a web component that you can, that shows you can scan this barcode with a phone, and it will load through the Expo app on your phone. So I don't have to be, as long as I'm on my local network, I can publish it to the Expo repo. And then I don't even have to be on my local network. So anybody can load the app that I give them access to. So there are a lot of options for you to deploy and debug Expo apps. That's, in my opinion, one of their biggest benefit. And then you can see from the menu that they have, you can run it on Android, I can run it on iOS, I can run it on web. So the deployment and the run is fairly straightforward. React Native, just pure React Native, is not as fun to do some of those things. So I'll run it against the iOS emulator. And there's our iOS emulator running. And hopefully we'll open the app. I've had some issues with that. I fixed some of those, I thought. Yeah, I didn't like that. Let me go and load it manually. So I can go into the Expo app on React, and I will just copy. Actually, that's because, I'm sorry. Let me start over. That's because it's starting it on a different emulator than the emulator I was run into. So I'll go Shift I. This allows you, shows you all the emulator that I've got running. And I'm going to select the right emulator this time, and hopefully it'll open it on it. And if not, I can just load it from simply copying this address, and I will load it into my emulator. And let me see my profile here. I just paste it here, and it should open on the emulator. Now, once I've done it manually, I've learned that it actually does all the hot reload and everything else automatically, but I've had some issues with this happening at first by default. And you can see now it's building the JavaScript bundle, and it's actually going to deploy those binaries to the device, and we can run it almost as if you're running it on an actual device. And this is, like I said, just a blank React Native mobile app with TypeScript. And then it has, I think, some tabs. So it has like tab 1 and tab 2. So this is just the default stuff. I haven't written a single line of code yet. So just simplicity for that. Let's stop that. And then the next piece that I want to do is I'm actually going to install, I'm actually going to do the Amplify Neat. And what that's going to do is going to create the backend that corresponds to this application. And there's a couple of questions it's going to ask me. And it's going to ask me for a name for the project, and I'll just keep the default. And then I'll keep, for the most part, most of the default. I can do set up the environment, the editor, Visual Studio Code. You know, I'm on JavaScript. It's going to be a React Native app, and then some path components, and then build commands. I'll just answer yes to that. And then it's going to tell me I'm going to build the AWS CloudFormation piece that corresponds with that. And then it asks me, how do I want to access AWS? And you can use access keys or profile. I've already set it against my default profile. And then it did not like it. Thought I did see there, but I may have not. The beauty of using a Mac.
Hey, Yair, could you increase your font size just a touch?
Absolutely. Now, I don't know about the terminal, but like as a whole, let me see if I can just make this bigger. I'm sorry, I just have a very large screen.
And if you can't, that's fine. It's just a little hard to read.
Yep. I tried. The other problem is that the keyboard is not a Mac keyboard. So let's try to do. There we go. Should be better.
Much better.
Yeah, awesome. So again, we're going to answer all those questions. Run the same command again. Now as a sudo user should be able to build everything. Now, also part of the stuff this init command does, create all the folders and the files it needs inside the app itself. So it initializes everything in the cloud, and we can go right now to my AWS account, and we can see the CloudFormation components that this created. So you know it sets everything up, and you can see, and it is done. So right now I can essentially start and it create that folder called Amplify with the config folder. There's a backend folder. So there's a whole bunch of stuff in here that Amplify uses as far as boilerplate code. to do a lot of the things that you want it done. The next piece I'm going to do is I'm going to actually install the Amplify component into the app. So that way it's going to be available to me as an import. Maybe. Oh, there we go. And it's just the AWS Amplify for React Native. And so this should take about a minute to run. And then the last component is we'll go into our app.tsx. So this is complete. And that's just the home page in React Native, just like your regular React piece. And the first thing we're gonna do is we're gonna add the two import statement. And by the way, almost everything I'm talking about today is available on the documentation. It's fairly well documented. There's obviously a couple of gotchas in the documentation. So if, for example, if you want to use TypeScript, the documentation is written not for TypeScript. So you may have to do some modification there. And then I've found some issues in the documentation. Like, for example, they're expecting AWS export to be here in the root, but actually AWS export sits inside my SRC. So this import would fail. So I'm going to have to actually bring it from why does it not find SRC? Oh, yeah, I'm missing a slash. And then there's my AWS export. So a couple of things in the documentation are not 100%. As a whole, Amplify is a fairly young actor in this whole ecosystem of cloud frameworks. So I started using it about 2 years ago, and it was very not baked. So there were definitely a lot of issues, a lot of bugs. It has improved a lot. In my opinion, there's still some issues and bugs that occasionally you have to go through, like, for example, this path problem. Just so you know that, you may have to go through some kind of experimental on some of the things to get it working as expected. And then the last line that I'm going to add is the line that basically configures Amplify based on that config. And so this basically loads Amplify, blank Amplify into my application, and now I can start using it. And like I said, everything I'm talking about, you can find out. Let me show you guys real quick the Amplify docs, just so you can see how well most of the docs are written. Yeah, so if you, let me increase the size of font on this too, so you can, nope. There we go. So, everything is here inside the Amplify docs. You can start a tutorial. They'll talk about how, and you can change it from React Native. You can see that, sorry, let me go back to here. You can see that Amplify really works against multiple, you can do Android, Angular, Flutter, Ionic, iOS, JavaScript, Next.js, React, just regular web React, Vue. So they have code pieces and components that actually hook into all of those frameworks. We're talking about React Native, so that's what this tutorial will be, but you can go in and look at the tutorial across all those frameworks. So all these pieces I've done. We are just now finished the Amplify init. We finished, these are the 3 lines that we set up. And the next step, we're going to create an API. So almost everything in Amplify is kind of like an interview component. So you'll say, I want to do a piece, and then Amplify is going to ask you a couple of questions. And this, based on those questions, Amplify is going to generate a lot of the components and the code. So we're going to add, the first thing we're going to do, we're going to simply add an API that going to add and remove the heroes. So a simple CRUD operation. So I'll do and then Amplify is going to start asking me what about the API that I want to add. So my options are GraphQL or REST. So you can do a regular REST API, and what that does is really creating an API gateway in AWS that sits in front of a Lambda function, and you can actually go in and create that Lambda function as well. So you don't have to create a GraphQL API. You can absolutely use REST, and it'll just go through an API gateway and create a Lambda function. And you can edit the, and it's a Node, I believe, Node.js Lambda function that you can edit. Again, I'll show you where you added all this stuff inside the app itself. So you don't have to go necessarily to AWS to do a lot of those things. So you can give it a name. We'll call it Hero Showdown demo. Now this kind of important here. How am I going to authenticate against the API? I'm going to use API key just because it's the simplest, but that's definitely not recommended for production environments. For production environments, I would either use IAM or Amazon Cognito User Pool, or if you have some kind of an OpenID provider, you can absolutely use that there. I'm going to use API key just for simplicity, but I would not recommend doing that in production. And then I can call it key, and then it's going to ask me how do I want the key to expire. I can put it at 10 days. Does it ask me if I want any kind of advanced setting? And again, for simplicity purposes, I'm going to say no. Now here, if I already have a previously made GraphQL schema, I can enter the file here. Since we don't, I'm going to just answer that no. But you can bring, if you already have GraphQL services with schemas, you can just bring those over. You don't have to write everything from scratch. And then by default, it gives me two options here. I can use either a single object with fields or one-to-many relationship of one object, like blogs with posts. We'll do a single object. Simplifies our world. And then it's going to ask me, since I didn't have one, it's going to ask me, hey, what's your editor? Do you want to edit the schema now? And I'll answer yes. And then it's going to ask me which editor do I want to edit the schema. I'll put it in Visual Studio Code, and it will actually open my schema. And if you see, this file is actually opened inside my backend folder in Amplify backend. And then I have that schema.graphql file. And here I can, I'll rename this instead of to do, we'll call this hero. And then we'll keep the ID. Name is fine, description is fine. Let's add something like rating. And then make the, again, I'm on a Mac, so I got to use the Mac keyboard. And then make this an int. So let's save this. Oh, before I save that, I actually have to run a command that allows me to save that because, again, I'm in a Linux world. So I gotta. It is sometimes much easier to work in Windows world. I'm not a Mac fan, if you can tell. It should give me the permissions, and now I'll be able to save this. And then I'm save. And then the next piece, so now I've edited the schema. I said I wanted a GraphQL API, but now I have to grab all these changes I did locally and I have to push them to the cloud. Essentially, that's going to create a CloudFormation component, and that CloudFormation component is going to go and actually create all those components that I asked it to do. And what this is going to do is going to create an app sync component that's going to be like the GraphQL server, like we talked instead of Apollo. And then in the back end of it is going to already create the DynamoDB table that's going to host this schema. And so all that plumbing is going to be taken care of for me. I'm not going to have to do anything. So I'm going to do that push. And one of the things you'll see, Amplify is going to tell me, oh, these is your changes. Are you sure you want to do those changes? And it's going to list, see, it's telling me, hey, you've added this API. It's going to be created. Are you sure you want to do that? And answer that yes. And now we'll sit here and watch it spin for a little bit. And here also it's asking me if I want to generate code. So this is going to create a lot of that CRUD operation boilerplate code for me. I wouldn't have to worry about it. You can answer no here and create your own. Again, I'm going to, then it asks me, hey, do you want it in TypeScript, in JavaScript? Since we're already in TypeScript, we'll keep it that way. It's asking me which files. And then it's asking me if I want all CRUD operation, and I'll answer yes to that as well. And then maximum depth, I'll just put 2 for now. And then again, the file of the, and then you can change those things. So these are all absolutely configurable. Just remember when you start changing those things, you have to understand the implications on some of those changes. But this, as you can see, goes actually into, and I can show you my AWS environment. Let's see. And we can start seeing some of those things being created in my AWS environment. So if we go in here, and we go to CloudFormation, and you'll see we have stacks and there are nested stacks, and this is actually in progress of creating. And so it's actually building those CloudFormation stacks that build the backend for it. If we're going to go to something like app sync, we should see there is our app sync component. And you can actually, once this is fully complete, you can run queries directly here, or you can do what they call Amplify mock, which opens a console on your client that allows you to actually mock all those APIs and test them before you even go into the React Native code. Let's go back. And then if you want to go to the Dynamo, let's see if it's already created our Dynamo table. And we have our Dynamo table, yes. We have 2 because I've already played with this demo earlier today. And so once this is complete, and should be complete here in a minute, you saw most of our resources are already updated, already created. Once this is complete, we have a full back end that we can communicate very simply from within the regular React Native app. I can now close my schema. And then the next piece that we will start to do is actually write some code components that should allow us to communicate, to actually do the full CRUD operation into the AWS backend. Any questions so far? Now, when you add authentication, like I said, you can add, so one of the cool commands is amplify status. I can do that and it will show me what do I have. So right now I only have an API, there's no changes on my front end, it has to go to the back end. If I go in and I modify the schema, it will say there's changes, you need to create and do another amplify push. That's going to go and update the whole pipeline in the back end to account for those schema changes. So at any time, you can also open Amplify console, which will basically open your, your AWS console. And I'll go in the presentation, we'll go back to PowerPoint and I'll go over some of those commands. But let's start actually writing some code. So the first thing that I want to do is I want to set up all my imports. So I want to grab my input statements, and I'm going to not bore you with writing all of those, but we can go over them. But I'll just copy from an existing project I've got. And we can paste that, and then all my dependencies will be in. Change my path on all of those. Okay. So basically, I've loaded some React components. I've loaded Amplify. I've loaded the config. I've also loaded some API, the graph result, and then two lists that Amplify already created for me. One is the create hero, and the other one is the list of heroes. So fairly simple and straightforward. The next thing I want to do is I want to basically set up the state, right? So I will set up my default state for a hero. And I'll just do that here. And I'm going to change this from uppercase I to lowercase I, just so that way I'm consistent. And some style sheet work that I've put before. And so we'll add some style sheet component in there. And now I can start writing, we'll start writing the code for the, the first load of, and I don't have a Mac keyboard, so everything I have to go back into the Mac to do the Mac keyboard keys. So we'll do, and so we'll just open again, I think I have to do that here. I did it in the wrong place, didn't I? I think it edited it for me. There. And then we'll say, we'll create the function here in a minute. Just say, hey, go get heroes. And then open close parentheses for that. And then we'll make it return an array of heroes. So the only thing I got to do now is go write fetch heroes. So that. Next. So let's write fetch heroes. We'll call this, make it an async function. Nope. Still doesn't work on the Mac keyboard. Some of the stuff works, some doesn't. Very interesting. So we created fetch heroes. And here, all I want to do is just, hey, go grab all the hero data. So this is the line that's probably the important line as far as going grabbing the data all the way from the GraphQL. So we'll create a const hero data, and we're going to say this is of type any. And anymore, I think you don't have to do that. I'm just used to. But in TypeScript, since it's typed, I'm going to declare this as an any, and we're going to do an await on this since that's actually going to the back end. And we're going to use API.GraphQL, and that's going to return a GraphQL operation, and this is going to return me a list of heroes. And all those components are already defined inside here. So I've already imported a list from heroes from my GraphQL query. So the query is already set. If you want to go change the query, you can always go into this file and change the query. So if you want to add where statements, if you want to add some sorting, it all could be done there. So this simple one line of code now gives me a simple list of heroes. So very, I didn't have to write a lot of code. Most of the boilerplate was done for me. With one line of code, I'm already going and grabbing a component, a list of data from the back end. And then the only thing I want to do here, I'll just, let me make this, yeah. I'll take that hero data that came back, and I'm going to break it down a little bit. And then we're going to have to call set heroes. And we're going to have to write set heroes here in a minute as well. I'm going to pass it. So we just created. So next, actually I did create set hero. No, so set heroes. It's from the state. So let me put that inside the constant, and actually the form state as well. So let me initialize this state here. After let's find missing set heroes. There we go. So now I have set heroes, and basically I'm loading the heroes to the state, which I'll pop them into the components that actually display the heroes. The next thing that I want to do is I want to create a function to add a hero. And then the last thing I'm going to do is create a function to handle the change of the text box that adds a hero. So let's do the add one first. Hero. Okay, I'm gonna. And you can obviously do. You can obviously do try catches around everything. For simplicity purpose, I'm not doing try catches, but create another const here. This will come from the form state. So do a set, call this guy, and pass it the two components that are the heroes, and it will be of type hero. Yeah. Yep. And just move it line, and then we'll do the set form state. And this will map back to the initialized state. And the last piece that I'm going to do is I'm going to do the actual await to create the hero. So this is basically my create operation. So I'll do API.GraphQL. And then I'm going to pass that GraphQL operation. And I'm going to make this of type create hero. And just put an input around it. And again, I apologize. I did not realize I have to do this on a Mac probably until about a day ago. Input hero, and this is I just now create, this line of code creates a hero. So the only other thing that I want to I'll just copy here is real quick, just a generic handle change function. They will handle the changes on our text boxes. And then the last thing that we'll do is we'll actually load our text boxes. And so
just a quick time check here. We have about 5 minutes left. So
yep, I'm almost done.
You got it? Okay, cool.
Got it. So we're going to go back here and we'll put it under the status bar. You can take out most of this stuff, but this is just a two text input area, a button that allows you to add hero, and then just the map that displays all the heroes we've added. So now we'll save all that. Okay, we'll save all that, and then we'll run npm start, and it should run fairly quick. You see it loads the web component of it. I guess we have an error. You didn't like something in my temp file. Oh, not modules. Show to construct transformer. That's new. I have not seen that before. I guess we can still try to open it on iOS. I hope it builds. No, it did not. It gave me the same call stack error. Yeah, it didn't. So we are missing something. Let's see that I have everything. We got the styles, like fetch heroes, add heroes, and handle change. Let me, hold on, let me try this. Let me do this. Let me close this up. Let me stop this one. And then I'll show it to you in here. There you go. So this basically have two text boxes. I can create, I have a Superman test, Batman that I've created previously. We can create a Wonder Woman and give it a description. And by hitting create, it simply creates it. This goes all the way down to DynamoDB, writes it there, and then updates the state here. And if you guys want to see the backend, we can go to our, yes, our AWS session expired, but I could have shown you inside the DynamoDB the components. Let's go back to our presentation real quick. I want to show a couple more slides.
Hey, just to let you know, we're at time.
Okay.
So
if anybody wants to jump off.
yeah.
Okay.
So thanks everyone for coming. Again, reach out if you're interested in speaking. Otherwise, I'll get this uploaded soon to YouTube, and we'll see you next time. Thanks.
So some of the Amplify capabilities, you can do hosting. It hosts a static S3 site. You can make a React or Angular site, and you'll host it through S3. Now, some of the other options that I wanted to talk about before we finish, that's my last slide. So really in React Native world, the biggest competitor is Firebase, which is the Google component that does essentially the same thing. So if you guys ever used Firebase, very similar approach to Amplify. I think Firebase is actually somewhat more capable in certain areas than Amplify. It is, however, not, in my opinion, because the backend is GCP and not AWS, sometimes it's not as powerful in terms of handling loads and scalability and some of those great things that AWS gives you out of the box on some of their components. And then because of that, Firebase sometimes can get expensive, even very expensive as compared to Amplify. Another piece is Azure Mobile. So if you're, the Azure Mobile has a very similar offering, integrates very well with Xamarin. So if you're using a C# Xamarin mobile application, Azure Mobile definitely be my go-to solution there. And then you have Azure instead of AWS as your backend. And then you can always use AWS without Amplify and simply build all this boilerplate code that does all those things for you. So that's it. Any questions, comments?